Well, hello and welcome to another Spatial-Next crypto talk. I have been digging into the metaverse of late. There's a lot of hype around the metaverse and I've been trying to avoid the hype, but get my head around what people are really talking about here. So the title of today's talk is GIS and the Metaverse, Stretching Your Mind. Let's dive in. Well, let's begin with a quick question. I asked this actually, anyone that saw my last talk, which was on Spatial-Next, I asked the question, where was I last week? Because I haven't done any of these talks for a couple of weeks, so I was away. And that is me in a particular place. And I asked the question, what's the big mountain behind me there? What country is it in? And what's the town behind me there? And I didn't give an answer to the question, but I will here. Hold your breath, 1, 2, 3. That is the Matterhorn. Most people are used to seeing it from the other side, from Zermatt. That's the back side of the Matterhorn. It's still an absolutely awesome mountain. And before I tell you any more, that's Cervinia. So I was in Italy. Now Cervinia is a lovely little place on the border of Switzerland, looking up at the Matterhorn. And you can actually ski between Cervinia and Zermatt. And it's a massive ski area, it's glaciers, it's incredible. If you've ever wanted to go and ski in Europe and you've never been, try there. It's just absolutely outrageous. The skiing there is fantastic. The extent of the resort's amazing. And not super expensive. Italy. Switzerland's expensive, not Italy. All right, let's move on to our topic of conversation. We're going to do a bit of mind stretching here. I've been thinking this metaverse stuff and getting confused and throwing it out the window saying this is, never going to happen or going to happen in 50 years' time. But I've dug in and I'm going to try and stretch your mind in this conversation today. So let's begin by thinking about the world that we live in today. Actually, let's go back a little bit. The world we've always inhabited has been an analog world. And I'll give the example of that guy who's fixing a car. So we have a car, he goes in, he tries and diagnose the problem, and we drive the car. So purely an analog world, and fixes are done in an analog manner. Why did I choose cars as an analogy here? It struck me that we're now in this analog digital world, and I think Tesla are a good example of that. We don't any longer need these mechanics to do these fixes. When a car goes wrong, a Tesla has a problem, it's usually a digital download to that car. It's a big change to what we've been historically used to. So Tesla sits in this analog digital world, and a lot of what we do sits in that place as well. I think the biggest thing that's driving this whole crypto world and blockchain and the metaverse is today everything is being digitized. So what do we mean by that? Music is being digitized. That's been the case for quite some time, completely disrupting the music industry and will continue to. Books. Amazon was a good example of where we were selling books, but now we can read books with Kindles. So books have all been digitized. Art. And really when we start thinking about NFTs and that sort of world, the world of NFTs is based around digital art. Similar with videos as well, and there's NFTs of video, but we've got now digital videos. I remember talking to a cameraman friend of mine years ago, and he said, "Oh, we'll never go digital in the movie world. We're already digital. Not only are we collecting it digitally, we're presenting it and storing it digitally." Biggest one for us in the geospatial GIS world, though, is we're digitizing the world. So what does all this mean? There's an example. It's actually one of the products I work with at Lacana called Lima. And it's a really cool application that takes a digital representation of the world in a GIS. People can use it on their phones. And then they can actually do their work in the analog world. So they use the digital to help fix the analog. So we live in that in-between world where we're leveraging digital to help us in the analog. But this is where I'm going to stretch your brain a little bit. Think of it that we're moving to a pure digital world. So take that analog word out of that. And we're now starting to think about a pure digital world. And that's where the metaverse becomes relevant. So, analog, augmented, embedded. Sunglasses. We have sunglasses in our world today. In that picture, I think I was wearing sunglasses in that picture, but we wear sunglasses in our real world. We're now beginning to get into this AR world, augmented reality, where we can actually put glasses on and we can see pipes under the ground. We can see that building that the architect's designed but hasn't yet built. What is that going to look like when we put it into space? So all sorts of data is now going to be fed from our iPhone into these AR glasses. Google tried it, didn't work very well, but you know in the background those are all being built now. And I expect in the next couple of years we'll start putting on AR glasses and we'll actually get information that we can't see. And we'll get metadata about the things that we're looking at. And then the third piece of this, which is still some way off, are these VR glasses. I've got mixed feelings about this, but this is kind of the embedded world. So we're actually putting on these Oculus and we can actually walk around the Vatican, for example. So that's a lot of the long-term future. I don't know where that's going. Again, I have mixed feelings about that. My sense is AR glasses are the immediate future and I'm really excited about that future. But the data that feeds these things is going to be a digital source. So we'll keep on that topic and move forward. So let's think about identities. So in the real world, we have ourselves, Matt Sheehan, that's me with my sunglasses on. But what we're going to start moving to are virtual identities. So in the metaverse, we will have our own identity in the metaverse. And I won't necessarily look like that in the metaverse. I could choose a character that I want to be in that world. So we can actually model ourselves as different characters in that world, even though it's us. So we will have our virtual identities and we will have our real identities. Communities. In our world, we talk about countries. Countries are administered by governments. We have votes, we have taxes, we have all these things which is part of our analog world. But what the metaverse will be, and in fact what the whole world of crypto and blockchain will be, is this notion of digital sovereign states. And I encourage you to look that up, and I'll give you some reference points at the end, but take a look at what a digital sovereign state is. These are not governments that we know today. These are going to be digital communities, and I hope the commentators are right about this. These are going to be real democratic communities, not the communities we live in where we get a vote and often not representation. So these are communities where we build with a common interest, a common goal, hopefully administered by ourselves. So we're moving towards digital sovereign states in that metaverse world that we're talking about. We're also talking about connected worlds. And I'll use the examples that I showed in a video I did earlier in the week. But as we build out these worlds, and again, this is really where GIS and geospatial become highly relevant, we're building out these real-time 3D environments. And as we build communities, we're building out these connected worlds as well. So I'll give you an example. If we're thinking about Times Square in New York, that's an analog world. That's the real estate super expensive. We get to meet people there. We walk past people. There's advertising. There's all these good things that are going on there. We're going to have a digital version of that. It'll be new real estate. It'll be new billboards. It'll be people who aren't necessarily specifically in that location. So we're moving towards a very, very different world that is purely digital with our own representations in that digital world. We're also walking towards a new digital economy, and I don't just mean that we're converting dollars into Bitcoin or to Ethereum tokens or whatever it might be. We're actually engaged in communities in these digital worlds as avatars as ourselves, and we are working with different currencies that don't have the limitations of our currencies. We're not going to have to convert the yen to the dollar or the dollar to the euro or to the pound. We're going to have this common international currency that is based around the communities that we're in. So each community potentially has its own currency. Just as like I've mentioned before, when America was first settled, some of the Eastern Bloc states, they had their own currencies. Well, we're going to have these community currencies, tokens within this digital world that we can exchange between worlds, and we will move between worlds as well, between communities. But we're looking at a very, very different state of play. Again, I'm going to emphasize, you have to strain your brain a little bit to think through this, but it is not, it's a new, exciting world that we're about to enter, which is pure digital. So GIS question mark. Anyone that went to the partner conference, the Esri Partner and Developer Conference, saw a lot about gaming. And I spent some time chatting with folks about the gaming world, and my sense is we are beginning to see the merging of gaming and GIS. Merging has been this very dynamic three-dimensional world. GIS has been this two-dimensional world primarily, but with gobs of data. So GIS is the real world with lots of data, but in a two-dimensional way. The gaming world has always been this interactive 3D real-time world with not the same data and not a representation of the real world. We're bringing this together. These technologies are coming together, and that's going to be a core part of the metaverse. I would also say that the foundational piece of the metaverse will be GIS. The metaverse is still geospatial. It's a digital representation of the world or an imaginary world, but that has space. So we are still going to be building these worlds from a foundational perspective. From geospatial, again, we will be building three-dimensional versions of the real world and store it in geodatabases or other geospatial storage areas, and we'll be adding data to that, which could be buildings, it could be BIM, GeoBIM, whatever we want to call it. But the foundational data will be coming a lot from the GIS world and the geospatial world. One other thing to add is the analytics as well. So the analytics in the pure digital world, forget the analog world for now. When we do analytics on the real world that's out the window, we're going to do analytics on a digital world, this new, almost like going to Mars, if you think about it in those times. We're in this new place, this new landscape, and we're going to do analytics in that new landscape. So a whole world of new analytics will suddenly appear. Again, I will argue it will be powered by geospatial and GIS. Pretty interesting, eh? So, resources. Go read about this stuff. Real Vision, I've mentioned Real Vision before. Boom. Real Vision, Raul Pala, a brilliant source of information if you want to know about the metaverse, if you want to know about sovereign states, digital sovereign states, if you want to know about communities. Go look at some of the things that they're talking about there, some experts in the field, and you'll be blown away by some of the conversations. I have been. Some of the material I talk about here, chunks of it come from there. So it's really a great resource. Go to YouTube, and a lot of it's for free. So you can just listen into the conversations. They're great. I will also point to Patrick at Cesium and his colleague who are doing this Building the Open Metaverse podcast, which is really, really interesting. I really like what they're doing. They're very interesting guests they get on, but very well worth, from a metaverse perspective, tuning into what those guys are doing. Go look at Sandbox. Sandbox is fascinating. Sandbox is where people are buying land in the metaverse. They're building a metaverse. You go in there, you can actually see Atari and these other companies, brands that have actually built land or bought land, and they're building virtual offices in this particular world. It's really quite fascinating, and you don't need to have headsets on to get in this world. You can actually do this in just off your PC, so it's really quite interesting. But go look at Sandbox. I think Sandbox have got potentially a big future. The lead of Sandbox was interviewed on Real Vision the other day, so that's why they came to my mind. And then look at Brave. Brave is a browser which is built on blockchain. It's a Web3 browser. It's well worth going to have a look at it. Go and read a little bit about what that is and what it's built upon, and the base idea behind it. So there's a few resources. But anyway, hopefully I stretch your mind a little bit in this one to think slightly differently. I think the metaverse is a real thing. I don't think it's hype. I think the definition of what it's going to be is variable, but I'm imagining the way I've presented this correctly. The base of it is going to be a blockchain. The crypto world will be sitting on top of that, and these communities will probably be built around some of the elements within the crypto world. So it's a really interesting, exciting future. We're some way off of it yet, but I think get ready, be prepared, don't be left behind, because it's coming at us really, really quickly. So thanks for watching, and I'll do another one of these very soon. Thanks for joining us on the Spatial-Next channel. We're focused here on understanding the future of geospatial. That's both how we get to mainstream adoption of the technology and data, and how we start using blockchain and crypto to move things forward. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and we look forward to seeing you next time.